The interesting thing about lab created diamonds is that they've really only been able to make gem quality lab diamonds within the last 10 years or so. So when I first started out 20 years ago, I was told there's no such thing as a lab created diamond. There's lab sapphires, but if someone's trying to sell you a lab created diamond, they're lying to you. So moved to New York, work in fashion for 10 years, start working at Green Lake Jewelry Works. Suddenly there's lab created diamonds. And so basically a lab diamond is, it's the same chemical makeup and the same crystalline structure as a mined diamond. They were just kind of creating it in a laboratory kind of environment. They start with a teeny weeny little kernel of a mined diamond and subject it to chemicals and pressure and, essentially the same environment that it would undergo in the earth to grow the crystals.
If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment about the episode. And if you're watching on Spotify or listening on a traditional podcast platform, please follow, rate us 5 stars, and leave a review if you would be so kind. Thank you. Welcome to the Way to Know You podcast, Season 2, Episode 22. My name is Nick Rounds, and I will be your host. My next guest has been a professional jewelry designer for almost 20 years. She's worked for Banana Republic, the Naudry Group, and designed pieces for Steve Madden. And these days, she's working for the Seattle-based jeweler Green Lake Jewelry, specializing in custom jewelry pieces. When she's not busy finding the nearest body of water on her days off, she's collecting shiny rocks and carving wooden spoons by hand with a knife like a complete badass. Rebecca Pappas.
Hi,
Wait,
Nick.
I know you. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So you're a professional jeweler and
jewelry designer. There is a distinction. There is a jeweler actually makes the things. I'm doing more of like the drafting and concepting and whatnot.
There you go. Well, that's exactly why I want to talk to you today, because a lot of people know about jewelry, but I know very little about like what goes into it. And that's exactly why I wanted to talk to you today. Yeah. And so for all the jewelry noobs like myself, I want to learn more about it today. So but before we kick into your amazing jewelry work, I always like to start with like how you got into the business and what set you down that path. So who or what were some of the biggest reasons why you're such a creative and tactile designer today?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. I think that just like when an artist got to art and, if you're kind of born with the bug, you're just always doing it, as a little kid, you just gravitate towards it. My parents were always super supportive of us, having creative activities. And, my mom is super crafty. She always had a craft going on. And, she always encouraged us making things, doing things. She herself was always, DIYing, reupholster the couch herself, making the new curtains, that kind of thing. But I think that jewelry was something that I was always really attracted to because it's shiny, it's sparkly, it's pretty, and it's beautiful. It's kind of like the convergence of art, history, and geology. All three are things that have always really interested me. I think I was probably like 4 or 5 years old when I got my first bead kit, so started stringing from a very young age. By the time I was like 9 or 10, I was painting seashells with nail polish and putting them on ear hooks for earrings. And, from there, I think as a teenager, I knew I wanted a job that was creative. I knew I wanted to go into the arts. And so I decided, fairly early on that I was going to go to art school. I just didn't really quite know where that path would lead me yet. And honestly, I think a lot of it has just been instinct. I got to college and, was sort of, they give you a foundation studies year where, you're learning a little bit of everything. And, I'm not the greatest drawer. Like I'm a decent draftsperson, especially after, all these years. But, if I were to sit and draw your portrait, it would not be a very good look. But, so I was kind of unsure of how to harness my skills. And I just kind of found the the jewelry department very interesting. I liked the idea that we would be using hand tools and really sitting and learning these processes that have been, basically jewelry's been being made the same way since the Bronze Age. We just have a lot better equipment nowadays. So I kind of just kept following my instinct and just ended up with this career path. I can't say that I knew it was a job that existed when I was younger and kind of looking towards the future, but I'm really glad that I found it because it really suits me very well.
Were there any other profession types of art or professions within art that you ever seriously considered before becoming a jewelry designer?
Well, when I filled out my art school applications, they ask you to fill out, what kind of major you're looking towards. And I chose illustration just because I also love books. I love pictures. I love picture books. And it was kind of the one major that I felt like I could understand drawing. I could understand drawing and painting and telling stories through images. Whereas, I think I was halfway through my freshman year before I found out what industrial design really means. So, kind of like, had I known more about art careers going into art school, I could certainly have seen myself going in the direction of maybe textile design, surface design, that kind of thing. But ultimately, I think I would have always found my way back towards jewelry because of the connection to gemstones and historical pieces and things like that always are, interested me.
And you mentioned that you were chasing after the profession within college, and to touch on that specifically, you're a RISD kid. So
I am a RISD kid. Mm-hmm.
For people that don't know about the Rhode Island School of Design, what about that school and your experience shaped who you are today?
Oh, well, I would say that when I was applying for colleges, I did not know what RISD was. It was kind of just another art school on the list. I was a little bit wimpy and I didn't want to go too far from my family. I was born and raised in Massachusetts, not too far from Boston. So, I was looking in Massachusetts, I was looking in New York City, and, RISD is known for being very competitive and really difficult to get into. And I remember my high school art teacher was kind of like, you can apply, but, keep your expectations low. He really did not encourage his students to really shoot for RISD. And I was like, okay. And then I was just like, okay, I guess I got in. And I didn't really know it had that reputation until I got there. But I think one of the things that's really super special about RISD is kind of its proximity to New York City, where it's close enough that you can get down there to that art world really easily. And the other thing is that all the teachers there are required to also be working artists. So you would have teachers teaching you, and they are truly living the lived experience of being, a gallery artist, an independent designer working in their own studio and selling, or there are teachers who live in New York, work in New York City, and take the train up once a week to teach a class or whatnot. So you're exposed to people who are really living that life themselves, and the experience that they're able to pass on to you is a lived experience. And
as opposed to like a guidance school counselor that's just going to be sitting there yelling under their breath at some teenagers. Yeah,
they're not like teaching you from a book. They really know the deal, and let's see. So, but also, I really wanted to go to New York when I was a teenager. I was like, I want to go to college in New York, want to be in that city. But I think that if I had been in the thick of it, my work would have suffered. There's so much distraction. There's so much overstimulation. There's so many other things to get in trouble with, where RISD, I was on a campus with all these other creative people from all over the country and all over the world. And we had our we called it our RISD bubble, our nice little bubble that we were living and working in, while we really learned to see and be creative and try new processes. And it was amazing to have studio access with every tool you could possibly imagine. And so it was a really special experience. And it was I'm still very friendly with many of my colleagues from RISD to this day.
You mentioned growing up in Massachusetts. What was the creative scene like there compared to New York? And that's not really a fair comparison at all because
teenager. I was a teenager. Where I grew up in it was in Massachusetts, was kind of like outside the city, a little bit of a pretty beachy coastal town. So the art scene there, I was, not really necessarily something that I was a big part of. And it does exist. There's, plenty of artists working in the area, but I would say it's much more local. Actually, I have right behind me a photograph from a local artist near where I grew up. And then in New York, it's just everywhere. It's so much. It's so huge. It's, the galleries are representing like these really giant, globally known names versus something that's a little bit more intimate.
Yeah, from going to New York for the first time, it's funny because I'm a game designer, and games aren't really a known creative function out in New York as much as it is on the West Coast, and vice versa. I was really struck like how prevalent and how like outside of LA, like there really isn't a lot of a strong art scene other than just like little local pockets of stuff on the West Coast. But New York, it's so prevalent. There's so many living and working artists in New York. It's kind of wild. Just how much New York fosters creativity. I was always blown away by that. I guess, what about New York City? Because you started working in New York City, right? After, or was that San Francisco?
I had a couple like lost years where I was in Massachusetts after college, and I worked for some fine jewelry stores in the Boston area, and then it just New York was such a natural step. So many of my friends from school had moved there because that's just where the art jobs were, and I kind of followed down as well, and I had like $2,000 in the ego of a 25-year-old, and I was like, I can get a job, and I got really lucky. I hoofed it, and just put resumes out for everything that I found, and it was I think it was within 2 months I got my first job, my first true design job at WIKY Jewelry Group, and that was in New York City.
Touching on Nadri and Banana Republic, what kind of pieces or projects did you work on when you were working there?
Well, WIKY Jewelry Group is, I guess we would refer to it as a look of real company. So it's still fashion jewelry, but it looks very much like made from real diamonds and gold. A lot of bridal. So, I love antiques. I'm an antique girl. I love vintage. And so very intricate designs, very vintagey, a lot of sparkle. And, this was in like 2005, 2006. So I was still drawing everything by hand. Repeats and reflections had to be done on a photocopy machine, and we would fax our tech packs to China overnight. And, so that was a fun experience, kind of to be on the cusp of the technology that we now have today, and kind of grow with that along my career. It's fun to have had that knowledge, and also the hand drawing and drafting skills that I developed at WIKY Jewelry Group were an incredible foundation for the rest of my career. And so, I was with WIKY for about 5 years. And actually, the account that I worked on primarily at WIKY was for Nordstrom. So I have an early connection to Seattle in my professional career. And so I did that for about 5 years. And then I went on to Banana Republic, which was a very different experience. We were designing across an enormous breadth of styles, from, tiny little delicate look of real to, giant necklaces with fake flowers, and really big exciting pieces. And what was also really unique about Banana Republic was that we were a small part of a much larger whole. So as a part of the accessories department, I was also concepting up with the handbags and the shoes, and then as a whole, and socks. I've spent so much of my life in meetings about socks. And then, we were at the accessories division, then again within the
Wait. Hold on. Okay. What would a sock meeting entail? Like, now I'm curious. Like, like when you get into a really in-depth conversation about socks, like what kind of stuff are you talking about?
Well, first of all, there's color and like what colors are going to go in the 3-pack. And that is huge, and usually you have like 2 solid colors and a pattern. And what's that pattern going to be? And then how do those colors and those patterns match back to the collection at large of the clothing? But something like a 3-pack of socks can be like a major unit driver. It's one of those things where you're like, oh, I'm here, I've got my pants, I've got my top, might as well get some of these too. And then if you're selling a lot of that, then the revenue from that allows you to kind of play and gives you that money for the little bit of riskier things that like my giant necklace with fake flowers, but so yes, lots of socks. And then as the accessories division, we would be then within the larger division of the women's apparel. So we were seeing concepting coming from the top down, and designing almost a year out from when that would actually drop in the store.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing about, I mean, you're just touching on the fact that like so much thought and intention goes into something as simple as socks. It's always funny to me that if you have the name design in your title of any sort, like how much thought and just the fact that you're going to have a meeting about socks and intention there seems really silly. But then that is the whole point of design, is that people should be able to just look at something, decide they want it, and keep going and pick it up, and never know how much thought and intention went into that specific thing. I think chairs are the easiest example of that, of like, there's so much thought and intention that goes into chairs because it's almost a functional piece of art of, what is the function and form of this? What is it going to do? Like, where is it going to sit? Is it for an office? Is it for a living room? There's so many questions you can ask about a chair and like what purpose it serves, but you don't really think about that as a consumer. You're just like, oh, a chair, I'll sit in it.
Exactly.
But then you sit in it and you're like, why does this chair feel better than this other one? Or why do I like this chair aesthetically more than this one? And those are all things that designers think about regardless of profession, is who is this for? And what do I want to imbue this object with to make it satisfactory to customers? So.
And I think that the key to being a really good designer is to make all of those thoughts and intentions come through and have the consumer sit in the chair and not even think, why is this more comfortable than my other one? But like not even notice those design intentions, but just enjoy it. And, you keep kind of gravitating to it. Like, this is my favorite thing, but you don't even really know why. It's because all of those, you have no idea that there were 5 materials meetings about what that chair should be made out of, inside material, outside material, and the mechanics. So yeah, I think that that's really kind of a nice correlation to draw.
Absolutely. And I just like talking about nerdy stuff in general. You described the fact that you're part of the accessories team at Banana Republic. I guess what are some of the like most challenging things that you faced as part of that division? Because obviously Banana Republic, their main focus is clothes and apparel, whereas you kind of come in as like a little bit of an afterthought. I guess when you're part of a giant brand like that, like what are kind of some things you have to deal with compared to like a normal mom and pop shop of jewelry?
Well, layers and layers and layers and layers of corporate red tape is, I like to kind of describe a big company like Banana Republic as like a cruise ship. You have to, if you want to turn, you have to start turning really, early, because it's going to turn real slow. And I think that towards the end of my time at Banana Republic, the retail landscape had really changed a lot with direct-to-consumer companies like Everlane, or really, really fast fashion like Zara kind of coming in and really getting the new look fast to the client. And then just kind of, when you're designing a year out, but Zara has the runway looks in the shop already, and the runway show is like less than a month ago. How do you compete with that? So I think that also too, when you're dealing with really a huge change in the retail landscape, and your main driver is pants are your main business or dresses are your main business, it can mean that things like jewelry can go by the wayside, but in the end, it is part of the finishing look there, and so the attention is given to it. And then you have these massive collections that you design, this much into it to get down to here. And so when there's lack of alignment and you're trying to turn things faster, what I found was just there was a lot of redesign, a lot of redesign, a lot of sampling. And, eventually I found myself in the seat of having to explain to the factories and to our vendors and suppliers why we were doing so many samples, and it was a little bit of an uncomfortable place to be in. And then you have to get all of your concepts cleared through like level after level after level after level. Whereas, if working for, a family shop where you're working directly with the client, you have much more ability to make changes or change the timeline or, stop and reconsider and move really quickly, rather than taking this like giant collection and trying to tweak and change, but you're moving slow like a cruise ship, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Yeah, because I guess are there any other factors that kind of affect a collection or kind of like the direction of the company? Like, how does Fashion Week affect that, or are there any other factors that tend to affect the metaphorical cruise ship more than other things?
Fashion Week is a big one. I mean, when you're working for a company like that too, you're just always looking at whatever everybody else is doing, from the runway shows to Forever 21 to the people who are sort of like on par with the business you're working in. You're always looking at what everybody else is doing. And the idea there is you're starting to really see like, ooh, that feels really fresh. And that looks like something that would work for our brand. How do we take that idea, that concept, and that kind of general look and feel and make it our own? And, working for Banana Republic, we had 4 seasons and we'd probably have like 12, 13 collections for each season. So you'd probably be designing about 20 collections, knowing that a few of them would drop out. And then within each collection, you kind of build it out. Like, I would like to start with like the main focal piece. So your big necklace, and, you'd have one like big necklace that really set the tone. And then you can take some of those elements to make, your big earrings, and then your smaller pieces that kind of extrapolate out from that. So before you know it, you have a whole collection of 10 pieces based on, one kind of motif. And so also too, you have to kind of look across the 20 collections and the multiple pieces within it to say, like, where are we making repeats? Does this thing look different enough from this thing that they could sit on a T-bar together and someone's going to know the difference? So, but the devil is in the details, and jewelry is full of details. So, it's kind of like, you look in real tight on the details, and then you have to pull back and look at the bigger picture constantly.
That makes sense. Even if it's a dated example, was there a specific time where a new design from somebody else, or just something that came along that like kind of set your current plans on its head? Or I guess, have you seen a recent example of that, of just like a new design where you're like, oh wow, that is really fresh? I guess, is there anything specifically that comes to mind?
I would say, the most current example that I can think of is less like, oh, that's really fresh, but more sort of a unique style that you don't see so often is suddenly popular because of celebrity influence, which is a 2-stone engagement ring. Sometimes you might hear it referred to as moi et toi, French for me and you. Apparently Machine Gun Kelly gave Megan Fox one, and I think there was another, like Ariana Grande or something like that, one of those. So, all of a sudden we're seeing much more requests for these sort of asymmetrical rings that have 2 main stones versus the one center gem that we typically think of when you think of like the engagement ring emoji. And of course, big news this week, Bennifer is back together, Ben Affleck and J-Lo. They rocked the world back, when I first started out my career, when he bought her a pink diamond, which is incredibly rare and incredibly valuable. He really outdid himself this time by getting her a gigantic green diamond, which is even more rare and even more valuable. So
that is hilarious.
Yeah, celebrity influence is huge, and that's definitely something that I saw working in fashion with Banana Republic as well. If celebrities were out wearing certain styles and designs, consumers would chase those styles.
Yeah, I mean, rose gold is a common example of something that was, hot for a long minute, for a good amount of time. Are there any other kind of memey or trendy things, even if it's from the past, that you've kind of noticed over the years that you think are interesting or just like kind of came and went?
Well, you mentioned rose gold, and rose gold being a trend is a conversation that I have a lot now that I'm working with fine jewelry, primarily doing bridal. I have heard the popularity of rose gold attributed to the rose gold iPhone, which I was guilty of owning. And I was working at Banana Republic at the time when rose gold first started to become really popular. And I remember it was such a challenge to get the right color plating from the factories. We'd get a lot of like really orangey stuff coming in, and it just didn't really look quite right. And so it took us a couple seasons of sampling it again and again. And it took, I think, time for that trend to rise, for the factories to really start figuring it out. I do think that rose gold is here to stay as a new modern classic. I think before, say, 2013-ish, when the trend really started to rise, you wouldn't really see a lot of rose gold unless it was combined in a 3-tone with white and yellow. And I think that, yellow gold fell out of favor for a very long time in the 90s and 2000s, where, girls would say, oh, yellow gold, it was like my grandma's 80s ring, So I think now we're starting to see a little bit of an upswing in requests for yellow gold, but I think we would have seen that a whole lot sooner if rose gold hadn't risen in popularity as a nice warm tone option. And I get women who'll say, I can't tell if I want this because it's trendy or because I really like it. And I tell them, go over to Claire's Accessories, buy yourself a cheapo fake rose gold ring, wear it for a week, tell me how you feel at the end of that week. And it really works. I've had some people say, thank you, I can't stand looking at it anymore. Or, yes, I know I really love this. This is what I have to do for my ring. So rose gold has been, I would say, the number one trend in jewelry over the last decade or so that really has just come in and taken over.
Yeah, that's a really smart hack of just buying something that you don't really care about and just literally trying on the general idea of whether you want it or not. I mean, if you don't wear rings in general, putting any ring on your finger is going to affect you in ways you didn't think about before. Yeah, because you rock a decent amount of rings at all times. You're not just the president; you're also a client.
Yeah, I have to be balanced too. I have to have like the same amount on each hand. I do wear a decent amount of rings. Most of my rings, I have one that's like a nice antique, and then most of my rings are just really fun, semi-precious and sterling silver. But I love the gemstones. So, I like to say I like all jewelry from plastic to platinum. I do not discriminate.
Everybody can appreciate a good ring pop ring every once in a while.
Right.
So to break into like the devil of the details, let's talk about the process of what it takes to take a custom, because you're now currently working for Green Lake Jewelry and making custom pieces. But I think it's really so full disclosure, you and I used to be roommates, and knowing you and knowing about your work, and then realizing how much work and thought and intention went into each individual piece of jewelry, I always thought was really fascinating. So can you describe the process of a client walks in the door and says they want something, and kind of walk me through to the end of now there's a ring on a finger? Like, what does that process entail?
Well, I would say, the majority of my clients who are walking through the door are looking for like an engagement ring. Usually it starts with the engagement ring. We'll work together all the way through wedding bands. Sometimes, I work with people on wedding bands and already had an engagement ring or family ring or something like that. But so yeah, I usually do just start by asking, like, do you have something in mind? Did you collect any pictures you want to share with me? And then, based on what they may have collected for pictures, then I can just start suggesting things to try on. And I'll just ask them, as we're trying things on, like, oh, have you ever really worn a ring before? Do you want to see some different stone sizes? Like, do you like rose gold or yellow gold or white gold? And I just start asking questions and asking questions. And, as you're just kind of like building a portfolio of like, definitely not this, maybe some of that. And, I think that my fashion background is really helpful in that, I can look at a Pinterest board and she might feel like there's a million ideas there, but I can see the same idea kind of repeated again and again in slightly different ways. So I can kind of start to gauge people's preferences and just start making suggestions like, oh, you like this? How about like that? And so, eventually by the end of like that initial consultation, we've had some rings that we've been trying on. We've talked about a bunch of different stylistic items. I've kind of educated them over the different terms for the different details and whatnot. And then your center stone is a huge piece of that too. So there's a lot of talk of, do you want a diamond? Do you want a different stone? Do you want a mined diamond or do you want a lab created diamond? Lab created diamonds has been huge. You asked about trends. I can't believe that. I guess it's just so big in my day-to-day life. I didn't even think to mention lab created diamonds, a relatively new technology. And then some people have really strong ideas and some people are a little more like, I never thought about this before.
So what is a lab created diamond? Sorry to interrupt.
Sure, no worries. To just kind of like preface, the interesting thing about lab created diamonds is that they've really only been able to make gem quality lab diamonds within the last 10 years or so. So when I first started out 20 years ago, I was told there's no such thing as a lab created diamond. There's lab sapphires, but if someone's trying to sell you a lab created diamond, they're lying to you. So moved to New York, work in fashion for 10 years, start working at Green Lake Jewelry Works. Suddenly there's lab created diamonds. And so basically a lab diamond is, it's the same chemical makeup and the same crystalline structure as a mined diamond. They were just kind of creating it in a laboratory kind of environment. They start with a teeny weeny little kernel of a mined diamond and subject it to chemicals and pressure and, essentially the same environment that it would undergo in the earth to grow the crystals. So, some companies kind of tend to greenwash it as like the ethical thing to do. I think some companies are really, doing a wonderful job of creating them with, green processes. Some are just kind of making them, so like some of them are made a little bit better than others. Also, they can't make them perfectly yet. So you still have to go through, you've probably heard of the 4 C's, your color, cut, clarity, and carat weight. So you still kind of have to choose and be a little discerning with the lab created diamonds. I think they become very popular too because the price point is really friendly compared to a mined diamond. So, that kind of the opposite side of that coin is that unlike a mined diamond, they won't hold their value over time. So it's kind of like for the young folks, the analogy that I like to use is how every time a new iPhone drops, the old ones become way cheaper. For the over 40 sets, I like to liken it to when my parents got a VCR and it cost $1 million, but then within 2 years, there's like a VCR upstairs, a VCR downstairs, and one just for rewinding. Technology moves really fast and they become more affordable more quickly. So what has been really fun from a design perspective is that means that large stones have become much more accessible for the average consumer. And that's a whole lot of fun to design with, that's for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, it kind of sounds like the IKEA or the diamond, like diamonds from IKEA kind of like, I'm not buying this to make it last, or I'm not buying this to flip it and sell it. I'm buying this because it's functional and it's going to give me what I want, even if I didn't pay an arm and a leg for it. So.
Right. And, the big thing about lab diamonds not retaining their value, like, obviously you don't want to bring the thought of broken engagement into anybody's head, when they're in there looking at engagement rings. But there was, historically a long tradition of, purchasing the small diamond that you can afford when you're just starting out. And then maybe for your 5 or 10 year anniversary, trading that stone in for a larger diamond that would then be your anniversary stone. But, if you've got a lab created diamond and you're starting off at 2.5 carats, there's not really anywhere to go from there so most of my clients are just using the cost savings to go straight to the size of stone that they would wish that they want to have. So there's kind of two sides to the coin. How do I feel about it personally? Would I purchase one? I think depending on the kind of diamond that I and shape and size, like maybe yes, maybe no. But what I can say is that lab created sapphires, rubies, and emeralds have been around since the late 1800s. So, and that technology came way sooner and were very, very much in vogue during the Art Deco period. And sometimes I do get clients who come in and they're shocked and disappointed to find out that grandma's gigantic sapphire is in fact a lab sapphire and not worth very much. That one actually is an aquamarine, and that one is indeed genuine. But talking of the Art Deco sensibility, that's one right there.
Yeah, it's absolutely gorgeous. I think this is probably one of my favorite pieces that you've shared.
Thank you. I've done 2 pieces with that client, and we're working currently on a third, and all 3 of them are some of my most favorite pieces I've done at WIKY Links so far. She has excellent taste. And she lets me have a lot of fun. That's
rad. Sorry, I went off on a tangent about the lab created diamonds, but I just thought it was really fascinating. I wanted to go back because you didn't finish your thought about the process of
sure. Yeah,
stone to final piece of where you come into it. I think you were just talking about, I think it was like leading up to the part where you start drawing, basically.
Yeah, basically. And so you can kind of think of me like a project manager. I do all of the customer interfacing. So I'm kind of there to kind of guide and suss out what they actually want. I do all of the images. So sometimes I do hand drawing, sometimes I do some Photoshop. Now I've got like the iPad pen and I'm like drawing on my iPad and then throwing it into Photoshop and then hand drawing something else here. So whatever it really takes to get the idea across. I'll put together the images, and some people can really just like see it right away. Some people are a little bit more hesitant or kind of have a hard time visualizing. And there's all kinds of tricks with physical things that we can do to help someone see, okay, this is how big it's going to look. Yeah, kind of like that. Like, this is how big the stone is on your hand. This is how big it'll be coming around your finger. And then, this is a really nice example of what's called an orthographic drawing. So you're basically giving the to scale from all the different sides, so that then what happens from here, the client says, oh yes, I love it, okay, let's move forward. This then goes to a CAD modeler, and the CAD modeler will then create a wax model in using 3D technology, basically. And then the wax is cast using a process called lost wax casting, which again is basically what we've been doing since the Bronze Age. We just have way better equipment. The wax gets packed in kind of like a plaster-like material, and then it melts out, and then you shoot the metal in to fill the cavity. So when the wax model is ready, I will invite the client back in to come check it out in person. So it's yet another round of let's pretend, because you're like, okay, this is green. Okay, the prongs are sticking way high in the air, and you can't see the engraving yet because that'll be added once it's been cast in metal. But it does give them the opportunity to see how it's coming together 3-dimensionally, and you can really see things to scale, which I think with jewelry, one of the most challenging things is when you're looking at it, you're looking at these designs and you're looking at these pictures on your phone screen or on your computer screen, to then see it again. Oh yes, this is really what the size is. Okay, I feel like way less nervous. So once the client approves the wax, we cast it. And when it goes to the jeweler, it has kind of like a crusty surface area on the casting. And so the first thing that they'll do is polish that all down. And then from there, it's a level of detail. So one of my favorite things about Green Lake Jewelry Works is that they specialize in handmade jewelry techniques. So really fabulous hand engraving. That's an excellent example of hand engraving right there. Filigree, which are like those little kind of curly cues that get hand shaped and welded into place. Actually, if you go back one slide, that one had so that like right in the center there, those little metal curly cues are shaped by hand and then welded into place. So really spectacular detail work there. And honestly, as a professional designer, it never, ever, ever gets old seeing your drawings turn into actual real product that you can hold in your hand.
Yeah, that's the exact same for me as well. Like seeing a game go from inside of your head to a tangible game you can actually play is always like one of the most magical moments. So totally agree with that. So what are some of the most satisfying interactions that you've had with customers once you've delivered the final product, so to speak?
Well, what's really kind of cool about my current position is that it's a little bit of a process. So you really get to know these people, and for many of them, the majority of them, this is a super exciting time in their life. They're getting married. They're merging their families. There's so much going on. Oftentimes they're also buying a house at the same time. So just really getting to know people is a huge part of the satisfaction for me. I would say when you deliver that finished ring, there's nothing better than like tears of happiness. Occasionally you get tears of happiness. I had this guy picking up the other day. He was laughing, he was crying, he was laughing even again and then crying. And I was just like, I am like so happy to be able to make him feel like that, just so overjoyed over this really, really beautiful piece that symbolizes his love for his fiancée to be and just all the exciting things that they have coming ahead of them. And I would say my kind of confidence and my appreciation for my clients has grown about 300% since the pandemic. We shut down for about 3 months in 2020 from March to end of May. And then we've been, open in person since then. And since I do work with the public and, my family's on the other side of the country, I'm pretty strict about staying home and, keeping work home. So getting to socialize, getting to meet new people, getting to be a part of other people's lives as we move through this like absurd situation, once in a lifetime kind of hopefully experience has really brought me closer to them and really scratched that social itch. Otherwise, if I had to sit at home, I'd probably just be going out of my mind, dying to meet people.
Please, God, it
very satisfying.
That's funny. Well, not really funny. But yeah,
we can laugh now. It's okay.
Comedy, yeah. Comedy is stubbing your toe. Tragedy is stubbing your toe. Comedy is falling down a manhole and dying. I think it was attributed to Groucho Marx. It's either Groucho Marx or Mel Brooks. I'm blanking. I'll look it up later. Because the main reason that people walk through the door is to get an engagement ring typically. Are there any other like common things people might want to know ahead of time if they're shopping for an engagement ring or just shopping for jewelry in general? Are there any other common things that they should kind of know ahead of time?
Yeah, I think that like stylistically, it's nice to just kind of glance at what's around, what's out there, and what you like and what you don't like is just as important as what you like. And, I think that also kind of looking around will give you a little bit of a sense of cost. I will ask my clients, like, do you have a budget you're trying to keep everything within? Or are you still trying to figure out what everything costs? Because like, why would you know what it costs? Why would anybody know unless they were me and sitting on that side of the counter? So kind of guiding people through that process as well is part of what I do. But I think, if if you're gonna buy an engagement ring, I think finger size is a good thing to know, or just at least kind of generally. We can get pretty close. Some styles are way harder to size than others, and no girl likes to be proposed to and not be able to get that ring on her finger. So I usually suggest, erring on the side of caution and getting maybe a little bit on the bigger side if you're not really sure. And then that way, at least she can get it on her hand. Finger size, having a little bit of an idea, just at least an opinion. I've part of my job and part of why I'm there is to help draw out the ideas. But I think to come in with at least like an opinion of what you like and where to start is a good way to go. I would say right now, particularly a good thing for people to know is that jewelry has been in really, really high demand. And lead times are quite long. So I know at Green Lake Jewelry Works, we're currently working on a 15-week lead time. And from what I've heard, it's similar other places. And a lot of that is due to sheer volume. We have also experienced some supply chain issues, typically with just disruptions in shipping. Everything from a hurricane in the Midwest to forest fires in the Northeast can, disrupt parts that are being shipped in from all over the country. Gold has, gold prices have been very high. They surged to the highest ever in the fall of 2020. And, we've been seeing it kind of ever since. And then, Ukraine, so it's kind of, and we'll see where that goes. Yep. So I think that to keep your expectations around timeline top of mind, because volume is very high and demand is very high.
So what you're saying is if you're even considering within 3 months, just get the engagement ring now. And maybe by the time.
Yeah. Start planning for next year. And I would say it's not just the jewelry industry, it's the wedding industry at large. Now we've seen 2 years of wedding postponements and so many more engagements as people have realized, well, if we can make it through this, we can make it through anything together. Let's do this thing. I've heard my client was like, oh, I called the woman who's making my dress and she said, oh, I'm glad you caught me because my voice mailbox is so full. I'm just not even opening it anymore, or 7-month wait for alterations for a wedding dress, or venues booked out years in advance now. So, and then things can happen, like your photographer at the last minute might come down with COVID, and then, you have to scramble to get someone to fill in. So the wedding industry at large is booming. And so if you're planning a wedding, be flexible, but get as much done, in advance as you can. So I've been telling my clients, as soon as you know what you want to do, let's just do it. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore. I can worry about it for you. And we'll just know that it'll be here in time. Like, tick it off the list.
Yeah, it's wild. Just how many people have started getting married specifically this year. A lot of people that I knew that were planning to get married on that very convenient year of 2020, unfortunately had to wait 2 years to do it. But yeah, that's really good insight. So just building on the engagement industry in general as well. So diamonds are typically the most common stones that people chase after. What other types of stones should people be more aware of as far as like options that would be great pieces?
Diamonds are definitely the first thing that come to mind when you think of an engagement ring. And, there are many, many, many reasons for that. But from a jeweler's perspective, the reason why diamonds make for such an amazing engagement ring stone is that they are the hardest. And so they really stand up to that daily wear and tear. So, you can pass a diamond down from generation to generation and it still looks great. You might start to get some little chips around the edges, but with softer stones, what you start to get is a real like scuffed up look across the top of it. And they can even break. So, as an alternative stone to a diamond for engagement rings, we love sapphires. Sapphires are right underneath diamonds under the Mohs scale of hardness. And they come in a huge range of colors, actually. Most people, when they think of sapphires, think of that cobalt blue, but they come in all kinds of colors. Ruby is just a special red subset of sapphire. So those are also right up there. And we do at Green Lake, we do a lot of work with sapphires out of Montana. We have personal relationships with the mines there. The stones are all super unique, really beautiful colors. And, clients come in looking for something different. They come into a custom shop looking for something different. And if you have a sapphire and it has, like the Montana ones do, just kind of unique coloration and unique inclusions, which is kind of like the stuff inside, then you really know that you have a super special stone that's totally one of a kind.
Yeah, I didn't know about Montana sapphires until I stepped foot into the shop for the first time. I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And people like that it's from America, Technically the Pacific Northwest, I believe too, Montana, right?
I don't think they count. It's big sky country as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Are there any like favorite pieces that you designed that like you're really proud of that you're super stoked to work on? Or side question, from working in Seattle, which has a lot of nerds near you, specifically from Microsoft and other places, what are some interesting or unconventional things that you've had to design?
Well, if you want to know about the nerds, I have a fun one for you. I actually don't know if I've told you about this one yet. Actually, it's not being gifted until May, so I can't really go into too much detail, but it is Magic the Gathering related. And it is very large with a very large lab created gemstone in it. And yeah, the guy that I worked with, he's special connection with his wife over this particular magic creature. And yeah, he wanted to have something real special made for her for their, I think, 20th anniversary. And that the magic was a big part of their relationship early on in dating. And so, yeah, he had this piece commissioned for her. And he cracked up when he picked it up. I was like, I'm nervous. It's this like giant fancy piece and, little experimental. And he just, it tickled him so much. He just cracked up. And I think it's end of May she'll be getting it. So I'm like, fingers crossed, hopefully she'll come in and tell me how much she loves it. But it's definitely a place where, we get a lot of requests, and some of them we can honor and some of them we cannot. So like we can't touch anything licensed. So Superman, Pokemon, Mickey Mouse, no. No. Marvel, no. But you can do like a nod to, I've had Zelda fans do triangles along the side to emulate the Triforce, and then it's just a triangle ring. It's not a Zelda ring, so you can kind of get your little nods in there. And we do get a fair amount of requests to engrave in Elvish, so we have that element as well. So a lot of really fun, quirky stuff comes through. The majority of what we do is a little simpler, a little bit more of your classic engagement ring style, but every once in a while you'll get one where oh, she is a librarian. How can we get a book in here? And or how can we get like a cat? We want our cat in here. How can we get a little cat engraved secret in there somehow? A little footprint on the inside of the ring. So even the more traditional piece can have a little bit of a unique flair when you get up close on it.
That's awesome. Are there any other styles that you personally are a huge fan of? You mentioned Art Deco previously. Are there any other types that like really resonate with you personally?
Yes, definitely. So the Art Deco for sure. And then I would say sort of like the Victorian Edwardian period, which I think a lot of people, when they think Art Deco, are actually thinking of the Edwardian era. So lots of platinum technology had just been, gotten good enough that they were able to start working in platinum. Previous to that, everything was gold and silver. Lots of super intricate patterns. That's where you get a lot of those. That one I call deco, but has a lot of elements of that I'm talking about, where you get that like beaded line texture, the little stones set down into different shapes that create a larger motif. That one's definitely one of my favorites. So as an architect who designed that one with me, and I think you can tell, Art Deco loving architect.
Yeah, it's wild, a wild amount of detail.
Yeah, so anything that has like a vintage flair, lots of details, little teeny tiny engravings, that's really my jam. That's my favorite kind of style to work with. It's really fun to draw, and it's just like, it's unbelievable when you're holding the finished ring, and it's like, I know the guys who are making this, we're like laughing over lunch, and I know his kid, and then he just like hands me this treasure that he made. It's my drawing and he made it. It's really, really amazing.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I'm always most blown away by in your Instagram feed, of just like when you switch over, going from your initial design to the final product, and taking a 2D object but really interpreting it to be a full 3D, and then bringing it to CAD and making it an actual full 3D object is always really fascinating. And I love seeing that your initial designs are usually not that far off from the final thing, and just seeing like how much creativity goes into it always blows me away for just an object that's so tiny but has so much incredible amount of detail. It's like writing the Bible on rice. Like, it's like, who the hell can actually do this? It's wild.
Mm-hmm. And we do stuff like that sometimes, where a client will be like, oh, can I engrave this phrase in here? Will it fit? And I'll be like, well, let's see. Well, let's get the wax model and I'll show it to the engraver and we'll see, like how much can we really fit? Sometimes it is just a matter of like going to somebody who's going to be actually putting it in there and saying like, okay, so can we really get that small? But yeah, no, I love drawing the details. I mentioned loving the details earlier, and picky is not a dirty word in a custom shop. Picky is just another word for detail oriented, and a custom shop is where picky people like to come and get detail oriented. So sometimes I get clients who are like, am I being too crazy here? And I'm like, no, please ask all the questions. Please ask all the questions, and if you don't like it, let's change it, because we can't really go back once it's done,
I already have your money. We're all done.
I'll say like, from this point on, it's really hard to make changes. So if you want to pause and reflect, let's pause and reflect.
Yep. That makes sense. And if people want to get awesome custom pieces from you, they can visit Seattle and go to your shop in Green Lake Jewelry.
Hey, they can hop onto greenlakejewelryworks.com, and we do tons of work remotely with people all over the country.
Awesome. So I have one last question for you, and it's very serious, as most of my last questions are. Where is your favorite place to visit in the Pacific Northwest on your days off?
Ooh, my favorite place to visit. So as a longtime New Yorker, I still don't have a car. So it has to be on the bus line. But it would probably be just about anywhere along the Sound. I love to be right on that body of water. I love to be beachcombing. I love to be looking down and seeing what kinds of cool rocks I can pick up, and so much cool wildlife in the water here. And then if you're blessed with a view of the Olympics, it can be a really, really special treat. So Carkeek, Golden Gardens, or Discovery, like Discovery Park, probably hands down one of the best places here in Seattle. So I like to do that. I like to get out and be along the salt water.
And for context, the people who are listening, Puget Sound is the body of water that's one of the body waters. It's the one that's west of Seattle. Elliott Bay is the one that's touching Seattle, but then the general huger piece of body water is the Sound. And the Olympics, actually, it was really funny when I first moved here. One of my coworkers was like, oh, I'm going to go to the Olympics this week. And I was like, oh, I didn't know the Olympics were happening. And he was like, no, the Olympic Mountains, dummy. So yeah, that's how you know if you're a newbie or not. But yeah, good times. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. It was Fantastic to talk to you as always. So you already plugged Green Lake Jewelry and your website, or the website of Green Lake Jewelry, rather. Is there anything else that you'd like to plug before we get out of here?
No, but I have a message. I have a message. People, clean your jewelry. It is dirty. And if you don't know how to clean it yourself, take it into a jewelry store and have a professional clean it for you, especially right now in the midst of the pandemic, where we're putting so much hand sanitizer. I have had clients complaining of irritation because just junk gets caught under there. So clean your jewelry, wear your jewelry, and enjoy your jewelry. I think it's just a really special thing to have a little beautiful treasure. And at Green Lake, when we make it by hand, that makes it even more special.
Awesome. All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time.
You're so welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for having me.
It was a pleasure. Everybody else, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.